Hey crew, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun scroll saw project video, we're going to be doing some creative compound cutting and making a miniature clock for Valentine's Day. Now we are right here at Valentine's Day, but there's still a little bit of time to get out in your garage or workshops and make something handmade and heartfelt for your significant other. The handmade gifts always go a long way, and it shows that you really took the time for the person that you love dearly to go out and actually make something with your hands, as opposed to going online or going and getting a gift card or something like that. But again, Valentine's Day is the time of year where we show love to our significant others. But again, as I always say, love is meant to be shared 365 days a year. The design I have selected comes from an older issue of Creative Woodworks and Crafts Magazines. This magazine is over 20 years old, so please be aware of that. Here is the cover of it with the Intarsia fish on it. This is November 2005, and we've already done a previous design from this magazine last year. It's packed with so many creative designs, but the one we are going to focus on in today's video begins on page 11. And you can see it says Mini Heart Clocks by Mr. John Polymus, and I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. But here you see two beautiful visual representations of two beautiful clocks that use some compound cutting. You guys know I love doing compound cut projects over at the scroll saw, just to show off the versatility of what a scroll saw is capable of. But you can see here you have one with the traditional arrow through the heart, kind of like Cupid being love struck and everything, with two columns of hearts made from compound cutting. And then you have the one we are going to be making in today's video, and this is a miniature hourglass clock, and that could really represent something visually and artistic in your mind's eye, you know, like the time spent together building a relationship as the sand's going through the hourglass. Just thinking outside of the box there. But on the following pages you have a nice article on how to make and bring to life both of these beautiful and creative miniature compound cut clocks. And again, I do believe it would be appropriate to make these for Valentine's Day, given the heart nature of them, but you could make them any time of year. Here is the full-size patterns in the pattern pull-out section, and I've got them photocopied and attached to our material with clear packing tape. And I love using cedar for heart projects because with the red texture, once it's clear-coated, I think really puts an added elegance to a heart piece. And the base is going to be made from some thin cedar I have here. I had to edge join two smaller pieces together to get a piece big enough to put the heart base on. Here we have the bracket that will also hold the hourglass piece that I'm getting ready to show you, so you can see where you're going to glue the bracket to, so kind of like that. And then what's going to be held in the bracket is the actual compound cut piece. It's an 1.5 inch thick piece of material, and as I always say with compound cut projects, I hope it goes without saying that you need to make sure your table saw, your bandsaw, your scroll saw, any tools that you're going to be cutting or milling down materials on needs to be dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. And of course we will double check the Rikon scroll saw with the 3D printed blade alignment jigs that I offer to make sure everything is dialed in. But you have a heart here, a heart here. You have what we will cut out and be the cavity, as I call it, to hold the clock insert. And then on this side it's more like a dog bone shape, but it's going to make the actual hourglass, I had to think there for a second, shape once we get everything cut out. And I already have the clock insert here. Now I don't have one to the exact size that is listed in the magazine, so please bear with me. And as you can see here, as we hold the clock here to this, that it is not to the appropriate size. So once I get the pilot holes drilled, we're going to quickly step back over to the workbench, and I'm going to hold the clock insert on this piece and lightly sketch to make that middle portion just a little bit bigger to hopefully hold the clock insert better. Again, you can go and shop for the proper clock inserts. This is just one I had in the workshop. I had two little clock faces and they were both the same size. But I'm really excited to make this project so it can be done and finished and displayed just in time for Valentine's Day 2026. And since everything is pretty much prepped and prepared, I'm going to lay these two pieces behind me on the workbench. And since this one is the only one that needs pilot holes drilled in it, let's move over to the Craftsman drill press and drill those pilot holes so we can get started. And over here at the Craftsman drill press, we're taking a small drill bit and drilling out all of the pilot holes for internal cutting. And you want to be very slow with drilling out the pilot holes here because you do not want that drill bit to drift or warp within the material. Then your compound cut will not come out properly. But after the pilot holes are drilled, as I said, we're going to step over quickly to the workbench, and I'm just going to take a basic ink pen here and kind of trace around and make where the clock is going to go a little bit more bulky and larger in a way. Hopefully this will work during the scrolling process. But then it will be time to head over to the Rikon scroll saw, and before I ever begin cutting any material, I'll double check to make sure everything is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees with my 3D printed blade alignment jigs here that I offer. Great for quickly making sure everything is dialed in perfectly. Indeed it is. And I'll put my dust mask on, and I've got some good music going, and I'm threading the blade through the first pilot hole, and we will be ready to begin making sawdust. For all of the scrolling on this project, I'll be using a number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade, and it will cut through the material exceptionally well. It's just with walnut being a little bit harder than normal materials like pine and 1/4 inch plywood, you need to, of course, take your time and let the blade do the work because it is a much slower feed rate due to the 1/2 inch thickness of our block of material. But I am being as loyal as I can be to the cut line. And now I am cutting out the circle here that will hold the clock. And ideally I could have done this with a Forstner bit, but I wanted to cut everything out completely over on the scroll saw to show you guys. Here at a close-up view, we have rotated the piece over, and the feed rate on this side will change drastically than from the first side because the scroll saw blade is floating through what I call negative space, meaning the scroll saw blade is floating through open air. So again, the feed rate will change drastically when you start rotating the piece. So always be aware to keep a firm grasp on your material during the entire scrolling process. But I will come around to this side, and then we will step away from the scroll saw, and this step here is totally optional. I just like to clean up as much of that excess sawdust that's generated as possible and then tape it back into place. Removing that sawdust just helps reduce burn and friction marks from the scroll saw blade. But I'll tape it right back into place with some more clear packing tape here. And I love using clear packing tape because it helps lubricate the scroll saw blade. And then we're ready to begin doing the final bit of compound cut work by releasing the side that has the 2 hearts that make up the hourglass. If you guys like what you're seeing, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. I'd really appreciate the support. All in all, it took me around 45 minutes to scroll this project out, give or take, from start to finish. Again, it's just a slower cut over at the scroll saw. And if you guys would like to try this design, again, it's an older Creative Woodworks and Crafts Magazine pattern, so you would have to source out the pattern or try to get in touch with the pattern maker, Mr. John Palamas. Now we have some traditional scroll saw work by just cutting out the heart-shaped base and the bracket that will hold the hourglass heart itself. And I'll want to keep track of the pattern here when I get done cutting because it indicates where I need to drill some pilot holes to hold some nails that will hold everything together. But we will now carefully remove the pieces after marking for our holes. And this is where we start to get our first visual. And unfortunately, my piece was broken. I was as careful as I could be over at the scroll saw, but I think it was because I modified the design. That is why the piece broke loose. But I'm keeping track of all of the pieces here, and I'm going to do my best to repair it to the best of my abilities. And I was trying not to get frustrated here because of all that time spent at the scroll saw making this beautiful piece. but I decided to try to fix it with medium grade CA glue and activator, and I was just being very patient here. Obviously the footage is sped up, but I was being very patient with holding the pieces in place until the piece bonded in where it needed to go. And I ultimately ended up using one of the offcuts to patch one of the areas here, and hopefully it's not too noticeable in the finished project. But this just goes to show that I do make mistakes out in the workshop when making the scroll saw projects from time to time. But now I'll just glue the base to the bracket after sanding it with a high grit Klingspor Woodworking Shop sandpaper in this sanding pad I've had forever. Drilling the holes to accept the pivot nails. And medium grade CA glue and activator does the trick. And after all the glue had completely dried and cured, I gave the pieces a couple coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss, and it really made the grain textures pop on the walnut and the cedar and really brought out those grain textures. But after it was dry to the touch, it was time to begin the tedious assembly process by putting the watch face in, and it was a very loose fit. Again, it was just because I modified the design, and I probably should have just went with a Forstner bit to do the hole for the clock, but I was very happy with the results here. And I got two very small brad nails and the cutoff pliers here, and I cut them to size to hold the hourglass clock in the bracket for the pivot for the hourglass effect. But a very fragile and delicate project, but a project that I hope once again shows off the versatility of what can be made at a scroll saw with a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort. Once I get done here, I'll show a close-up of it on the workbench by my sticker so you can see the miniature nature of it. Keep in mind my sticker is just 4 inches square, but you can see how small the little heart-shaped hourglass clock is. And here we have the completed miniature hourglass Valentine's Day heart clock, cut out completely from start to finish over at the scroll saw. Once again showing off the scroll saw's versatility for creative and unique designs, especially with compound cutting like we did in today's video. Not only is a scroll saw capable of cutting out flat two-dimensional pieces, but it can take it into the third dimension with beautiful and creative projects just like this. And I really hope it goes without saying that this project is extremely fragile, so you need to of course take your time and let the blade do the work and be as loyal as you can be to the cut line. But also be aware that even though I was as careful as I could be over at the scroll saw, I still ended up breaking the compound cut piece, and we had to repair it with some scrap pieces and medium grade CA glue and activator. You can actually see the top of the ring right here where it was cracked, and I had to repair it to the best of my abilities. The actual clock face that's in here is actually structurally holding that ring we repaired together, if that makes any sense. But you can see here on a 360 degree how delicate that this project is. And I do feel like with Valentine's Day right around the corner, this would be an appropriate project to sneak out into your garage or workshop and make for your significant other, and it would make a nice timepiece to put in an office cubicle, on a shelf, on an office desk, or on a counter, or even a nightstand. You can see here it fits comfortably in the palm of my hand, and it does not take up much room at all. As a matter of fact, it don't take up a lot of material to make this project. You can see here that the base is a nice heart-shaped design. Then you have the bracket here made from cedar, some thin cedar I had laying around, and then the actual compound cut piece pivots here because of the two nails that we drilled through. And again, those holes made the piece extremely fragile. If I was to grab this project too aggressively, it would actually break it and pop it apart. So I'm trying to be as careful as I can be with it. But you can see here it also pivots, so you could put it on an angle if you wanted to. You could put it just flat like that. But I really love how the two hearts here make up the hourglass shape, and it's kind of like two hearts combined sharing the time together in a relationship. You could visually interpret it in that manner. But over at the scroll saw, it took me around 45 minutes to scroll everything out completely, and then it took me a lot longer to fix and repair it because I was trying to figure out the best way possible to go and repair everything. But I hope that this also shows that out here in the workshop that I am not perfect over at the scroll saw. I continually make mistakes. But one cool thing about being a maker, a woodworker, a creator, someone that works with their hands, you can always find ways to fix and repair things. And if I had not told you guys and shown you guys that process on today's video, you might have just seen this posted on a social media feed and be like, oh wow, he made something cool. No, I do make mistakes out here in the workshop, but again, it is just such a cool piece visually to show off. And I feel like if I'd have had the appropriate clock face size, again, this one was just a little bit bigger than recommended. If I would have sourced out the actual clock face and waited for it to be shipped to me and got here, I probably would not have had no issues, because I wouldn't have had to enlarge that centerpiece where we cut the cavity out to accept the clock insert. But here is some of the offcuts. You can see that with a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort over at the scroll saw, you can start off with a 1 1/2 inch square block of material. In this case, it was walnut, and a beautiful three-dimensional piece will emerge, made completely over at the Rikon scroll saw. I want to once again thank Mr. John Palamas, and again, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, for the beautiful and creative design featured in the old Creative Woodworks and Crafts Magazine. I'm going to hold it up here. Here's the one that he made visually, and you can see how that clock face there is actually in the shape of a heart to really complement the two hearts on the top and bottom of the hourglass shape. And then here is the one we made in today's video. So they look very, very similar, but very different. Just two different artist takes on one individual project. And you still have this other one here if you would want to make it. And I kind of wish I'd have prepped and prepared that one with the issues I had with this one, but I still think the results were so worth it in the end with the 3D nature of it and the way you can pick it up, look at it carefully, and display it in so many different ways. Now you could of course cut this out of lighter material, pine material, if you wanted to, but again, that would be very fragile. I used walnut and cedar here. Keep in mind, cedar can be very brittle to cut out over at the scroll saw, especially once you start making it thinner and thinner like we have here. But again, I think it came out beautifully. Some options and versatility here would be to make it out of lighter material and then go in and paint everything. You could of course stain everything. I think a really cool creative flair, if you were familiar with epoxy resins and things like that, you could fill in the top and bottom heart with two different colors, maybe, you know, your and your significant other's favorite colored resins, and fill it in there. I know I had a friend, they don't do a lot of scroll saw work no more, but they took to putting epoxy resin and compound cut flowers to do the different colors, and I thought that was a real cool effect. So I could see that being done with a project like this. Once again, the full-size patterns were featured in the old Creative Woodworks and Crafts Magazine. So you can see here the full-size pattern is just roughly the shape of a standard piece of computer paper. I laid it on the scanner, copied it right out, and we were ready to start prepping and preparing this beautiful design here. And once again, this creative design comes from the old Creative Woodworks and Crafts Magazine. There you see the cover with the intarsia fish, November 2005 to be precise. And again, the article began for the design we did today on video, began on page 11, and then a great article follows with clear step-by-step instructions on how to make the project, and hopefully it'll come out better than mine did from start to finish. But if you guys have ever attempted either one of these clocks, please let me know down in the comments below, and also please send me a photo of it on one of my social media feeds or an email or something. I'd love to see your take on this beautiful miniature design that is full of hearts and full of love for Valentine's Day. Again, this is our second and final video for Valentine's Day season for 2026, and I thought it was just a creative project to make and bring to life visually over here on the platform. And hopefully along today's video, from the intro until now as we are closing it, you picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way, and hopefully it encourages you guys to go out and try maybe a clock or compound cut project over at your scroll saw in your garage or workshop. Once again, those handmade gifts are so heartfelt, and they go a long way into showing your significant other that you thought enough of them to go out and actually physically make something with your hands, as opposed to just buying online or getting a gift card or something like that. But really cool. Had a lot of fun in today's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it being made from start to finish. That's going to be about all for this one. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button, and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.